Continue. Facebook. What is this doing? Oh no, we don't want this. Never mind. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us. So, a little disclaimer to start. This program is not intended to diagnose or treat any illness or injury. It is for educational purposes only. Please consult your healthcare professional if you have any questions about any of the material. You are responsible for yourself and will not hold Laura Gibbons of Dynamic Movement Physical Therapy and Wellness, nor Gerry Viggiani of Lotus Blossom Psychotherapy liable for any illness or injury. Okay, so good afternoon. I'm Laura Gibbons of Dynamic Movement Physical Therapy and Wellness. Our vision is to provide comprehensive, holistic, and personalized physical therapy and wellness. While building relationships with clients, our mission is to empower and educate those at the Jersey Shore through healthy movement patterns, enabling clients to be more active and live a healthier lifestyle. As a healthcare professional, it is my responsibility to share knowledge and educate the community. This is why I'm very excited to share with you this interview of Gerry Viggiani of Lotus Blossom Psychotherapy. So welcome. Thank you for coming and joining.
I'm very excited to share what I'm sharing. It's what I talk about all day long. So it's a good thing, and it's really, really important.
It is. I've had, like we were talking about before, I've had a number of people that were very interested in this topic and a couple of other topics that we had talked about. So first off, tell me a little bit about yourself.
This is a second career for me. So I went to grad school a little later in life, and it's my passion to help women not have to go through a lot of the things that I felt like I had to go through alone. And I'm very connected to working with people with these deep emotional wounds, feel empowered and live their best life. So that's what I do.
That is great. That's similar to why I broke free and went into my own practice as well. This is why we had a conversation a couple months ago, and I think we hit it off. I was so excited to talk to someone that shared very similar outlooks and perspective on trying to help the mom tribe community. So
yeah, definitely. And I think it's great that we're making these types of connections because it really takes a village, right? Yeah. And so in all these aspects, there's so much available to help.
That is very true. All very true.
All right. Do you want me to bring up the slideshow?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds very good.
All right. So wait a minute.
Oh,
hold on. I went to the wrong screen. There we go. Share. I want to do slideshow. Except I can't see what I'm doing because this stuff is in the way. Sorry.
It's okay.
I don't know. I can't see because of the things on the top. Let's see.
Oh, you were just on animation, so you think you just go a little bit to the right, then oh,
right here.
You were on transition, so animations, then slideshow.
Yeah, see, I have like a whole bunch of stuff in the way. Hold on, let me see if I can make it smaller. Oh, there we go. Nope. Oh, maybe I can move this box over. I'm sorry, folks.
Okay. We all know technology.
Yeah.
We'll be right with you.
All right. That's not working either. Okay, hold on 1 second. Try this again.
Someone says F5, function 5 can start the slideshow if it's a Windows.
Okay.
We'll try that.
All right. Share screen. All right, I think I got it.
There we go. Perfect.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for your help.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So again, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm also a licensed clinical addiction and drug counselor. And my most favoriteest specialty is working with the perinatal population on mood disorders, so postpartum depression and anxiety, as well as birth trauma. So my office is Lotus Blossom Psychotherapy. I'm in Eatontown. I have two therapists who also work alongside me. And so we treat pretty much anything that's impacting women and only women. So just very excited to present again what I know.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll start. What are emotional wounds and how do you know you have them?
Okay. So we're talking about them being emotional wounds, right? So when I say the word trauma, sometimes people get scared, like that it's that you're mentally ill or you have like these major things, and some people do. We could like to talk about the idea of there being little traumas and big traumas. And it really depends on how the person has ingested the information and if they feel like they're in danger in any kind of way. I'm going to move this. Oh, go back. Oh no. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble. Anyway, in the mental health world, we look towards this diagnostic statistical manual for mental disorders. And so I'm going to give you the definition for post-traumatic stress disorder. But again, this system that I'm going to talk about moving forward really can happen to anyone who either has anxiety or has had some experiences, like maybe they touched something that was really hot, or they went to step off the curb and, just in time they stepped back on the curb, and nothing happened, but our brain stores that information in a different kind of way, which we're going to talk about. So a person has to have been exposed to a traumatic event or experience or witnessed it, or were confronted with actual or threatened death. And the brain responds to that with intense fear, helplessness, and horror.
Okay.
So you have to have a number of symptoms to qualify for having post-traumatic stress disorder. And one of them is intrusive thoughts. So, you're washing the dishes, you're going along your day, and all of a sudden you have an intrusive thought about what happened, and a memory, right, will pop into your head, or a memory about like what happened later, or it could be like it could be all the way on a continuum to something called a flashback, which may be so vivid that the person could actually feel like they're reliving the traumatic experience. And then the next one would be, you'd need to have avoidance. So avoidance behavior. So if I touched a hot stove and I got burned, now every time I see anything that looks like a stove, if I have associated it with something that's hot, I'm going to want to avoid that altogether. So I may avoid wanting to go into the kitchen. I may avoid wanting to touch a getting anywhere near a curling iron, anything that I assume is hot, because they trigger these memories.
Gotcha.
And then, I'm sorry?
I said, gotcha.
Oh, gotcha. All right. And then the next things are alterations in cognition and mood, right? So sometimes when people have experienced a traumatic event, it changes the way that they think about things. So they may think negative things about themselves, like, I shouldn't have done that. I should have done something different, or I'm bad, or people can't be trusted. And that lingers again because it's all packed in this same file cabinet together. The next one is alterations in arousal and reactivity. So this is where the more of the physical sense comes in, where someone may continue to be irritable, maybe easy to get angry, act in destructive ways, but also they can be really easily startled. So if someone were to drop a book on the floor, right, most people would be like, oh. But the person who has experienced a traumatic event like jumps out of their skin, right?
Yeah.
Because they're always on that
heightened nervous system. Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep.
And that can affect your concentration and your sleeping as well. Imagine if you're always heightened and aware, it's hard to fall asleep.
Yeah, that's why the things that I've been trying to educate a lot of people on is connecting to simple breath work where they can try to connect to their parasympathetic nervous system. We talked about that, and then literally something that's keeping you alive, breathing. And if you do it properly and with good technique, it can help with it can help the nervous system actually just calm down and come to a more steady state. So yeah, it all makes sense.
Okay. So the oops.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is the process that the body and the brain actually go through when something like this has happened?
Okay, so there's a theory called the Triune Brain, and what they're really saying is that our brain is divided into regions. So it's one mind, but 3 different regions. So the region that makes us human beings really is our frontal cortex. So it sits about here, like a little fist on the top. And that's responsible really for reasoning, for language, thought, verbal expression, and the intellectual and executive functioning. So if I handed you an IKEA dresser and I said, assemble this, that's the part of your brain that you'll be using to do that.
Yeah.
Then a lower system is called the limbic system. That's responsible for the language of emotions and how you feel, right? So something happens, the intellectual part of my brain says, oh, that was fun, but where I feel it in my body is part of the limbic system.
Yeah.
And it's also responsible for what we'll call implicit memory. So implicit memory is very different than what did you have for breakfast memory. What did you have for breakfast memory is in the prefrontal cortex. But body sensations, or if I smell Jergens lotion, it automatically makes
triggers.
Me think,
yeah.
Yes. Automatically thinks of my grandmother, makes me think of my grandmother, right? Yeah. So that's implicit memory. It's stored in our senses and sensory system.
Yeah.
And then the lower brain functioning, which of course is very, very important, is called the reptilian brain. And it's in the brainstem back here. And it's responsible for instinctive responses. So we'll talk about fight or flight response in a minute, but if, again, I go back to that earlier example about the hot stove, right? I touch the hot stove, what happens? I reflexively pull my hand back, right? That's the instinctive responses. It's also where the response to breathe, where you feel hungry from, all those types of things happen in the brainstem itself. Okay, without getting too fancy, I put a graphic of the brain here.
I don't want to scare anybody off, but
yes,
it does help to visualize it.
It does help to visualize it. So really the 3 places in the brain that we focus on when we're talking about trauma is, oh good, I can see that better, is, as I said, the prefrontal cortex. So again, that's the executive functioning center of the brain. And it really helps you to think through decisions and observe what you're thinking. It also puts on the brakes for itself when it perceives that there's something triggering or dangerous. And what happens is when we perceive that there is something dangerous, whether it's real or perceived or remembered as a trigger, it sets off the part of the brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala is our brain's alarm system, right? So it's like danger, 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 right? Amygdala fires and it shuts off the prefrontal cortex. Why do you ask? Because we don't need to think when we're in danger. We need to act now, right? So like the reflex for the hot stove, right? That's coming from the amygdala, right? That's telling you, get your hand off the stove. And then there's the hippocampus in relation to that, and that's responsible for the ability to store and retrieve memories. So your hippocampus is a lot like your computer's memory that writes files to its hard drive. After a trauma, your hippocampus works to remember the event accurately and make sense of it. So your hippocampus is really the guy that's saying, oh, you know, anything that looks like a hot stove, I want to avoid that at all costs. Now, this doesn't just happen. It happens with a release of tons of chemicals in our body. And the memories that are stored in that, as I said earlier, are stored in a different file cabinet. It's stored as physical, spiritual, and emotional excuse me, senses. Now that was pretty complicated. Laura, did I have any
No, that's all. I mean, all that's coming to my head again, because we talked again, is that Disney movie
Yes.
where the different little balls are going to being stored into the different sections, but they are there in different compartments and parts. And as the child in the Disney movie goes and does different things, there's different parts that are triggered. And so it completely, it makes sense. Thank you, Disney.
Yes, exactly.
Pixar, whichever one that was for.
I don't know. Was it Pixar? Maybe it was Pixar. I'm not sure.
They're all on Disney Plus, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah.
So we have access to all of them.
Of course, of course. So it just reflects on here that the brainstem is down near the bottom here. The amygdala is near the brainstem. And although the hippocampus, I don't believe is on this graphic, it is also pretty much right next to the amygdala. Your prefrontal cortex, that thinking part, is up there near the top.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
Okay, so what's important to know is people that are anxious or people that have these emotional wounds stored in their bodies, because they're literally stored in the body, versus the intellectual memory of an event. It causes the fight or flight response. These are lower instinctual responses that the whole animal world
reptiles and the mammalians, mammals, yep.
Yep. So when we receive a message that we're under attack, or there's a harmful event, or there's some sort of threat to survival. Now, we always want to remember that this is perceived, right? So like I see a lot of moms who've had birth trauma, and sometimes they're minimizing their trauma because they think, you know, well, it wasn't as bad as this person who was hemorrhaging, let's say.
Yeah,
right?
like I wasn't technically under any threat for my life, but you and I were talking, and the difference between, if I can say my own experience, the difference between my first, I had my first child who's almost 5, and my second child was almost 3. The first one, you know, it was great having an epidural, but for me, it didn't work out that great because, you know, I was pushing out and the doctor's like, he's being sucked back in. I mean, this is something that I had issues with, and I probably still did have probably a little bit. And then before I had my second child, I was like, I need to seek someone out. And thank God I did. And I mean, all doctors are, you know, different level, just like therapists or physical therapists. I'm not saying the doctor was bad or anything, but for me, it was helpful to be with a midwife that she could coach me through the process. And we talked beforehand too. It's like, that's another thing of preparation for your next birth is how was your first one and how would you like, and that's why we have your birth plan, like, but we were talking, you and I were also talking that birth plans don't always go according to plan. There's tons of women that I know, they're like, this was my plan and then I had an emergency C-section. Right. And they don't realize that there probably is some trauma to some extent stored in their body a little bit, or their mind, wherever, of hey, I wanted it to go this way and it kind of stinks it didn't go that way, and now I you know, I have to, when I have this child, I have to change how I'm lifting and carrying, and these first couple weeks are different and that's not what I wanted, and all of that, like we said, if you don't kind of work through that, then your body can hold on to it. So, yeah. Sorry definitely. for the side note, but I mean, if people talk to me, they're like, "Oh no, your birth was great. Like you worked out to the day before, and you only you know pushed for a couple hours, and you were only like he came out. You know, you had him like probably 8 hours after you went in. That's great." I'm like, "Yeah, but." Like the doctor was telling me he was being sucked back in. Like what? I didn't know what to do with that. I was like, well, I don't know what I'm doing, and I need to get this child out.
Yeah, anyway, definitely.
So even that was somewhat of a trauma.
Sure. Yeah, no, and definitely. And you know, thinking about a birthing mom, you know, she's not only worried about herself, she's worried about her baby, right? Yeah. So it really enhances the possibility that that experience is going to feel traumatic. Doesn't for everybody, and there really has to be some other vulnerabilities going on. But it definitely it can be an issue, right? Because if we go back to that earlier definition, right, there is a perceived or an actual threat to your body or the someone that you love and care about.
Yeah. Definitely.
So going back to the fight or flight response, right? So we have the threat, whether it's real or imagined or perceived, right? And as I said earlier, the brain processes that threat, beginning with the amygdala and then ending with the hypothalamus, as I explained before. Now, there's a bunch of chemicals flooding our body at that time. They call it the ACTH system. So it's the pituitary gland secretes all kinds of chemicals and hormones, and then we end up with all kinds of physical presentations. So cortisol is released, and adrenaline, is released. And then the physical threats that we see are heart rate increases, right? Because we're getting our body ready to run, right? We might feel shaky because of that adrenaline release. Our mouth may dry up, again, because we don't need the saliva in that case. Your bladder may relax, right? So, you know, we see sometimes women who are really struggling postpartum with a leaky bladder, right? Yeah. And sometimes there isn't a physical anomaly. It's just they're always in fight or flight. Yeah. And so that it becomes difficult for her to sustain holding in her urine because her body is thinking it needs to be released. It needs to relax.
Yeah. And then I talk a huge amount about the pressure system. Now you just had a baby growing inside of you for 9 months, almost 10 months. Everything's moved around. Most of us don't have proper breathing mechanics before we're pregnant. So then you take all of that and then you add, these chemical responses. And then if there's more pressure because of you don't have good, what I call is the canister system from your vocal cords to your pelvic floor. If all of that's not working well, and then you have these added chemical response, it's almost like, Jesus, like, what else do I have to do? Because, like, I've tried this and this and this, but until we kind of look at the whole system of everything, trying to not attack, but treat it in all the different manners. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. And with trauma, or again, these emotional wounds being stored in our bodies, there is a whole host of physical conditions or disease that go along with that, that once the trauma itself is treated, a lot of it resolves.
Yeah.
So if your body is releasing cortisol all the time, we're going to see problems with diabetes. We're going to see problems with slowed digestion. Again, if I need to run, right, or I need to hide, I don't need to be digesting then, right? So if I'm constantly triggered because I don't know what my triggers look like, and I don't have a way to manage them, then I'm gonna, we're gonna see things like IBS and irritable bowel syndrome.
Yeah, it's very similar. It's almost, it's not funny to me, but it's eye-opening to me, because that's all of the things that we try to work on as well. I'm like, yes, I'm a physical therapist, but I can actually help you with digestive issues as well, because if we get everything moving, properly and flowing, and release some of these traumas, that they get your chemical levels all in shape, then you're going to see really big changes.
Absolutely. It's not listed here, but we also see some skeletal problems and problems with headaches as well, because depending on how your body reacted to the traumatic event, you wind up either being sort of like hunched over a lot, or you're sort of like rearing away.
Yeah,
so
it's either completely flexed or completely extended. Now that's all putting all this other, like, head alignment is another huge thing that I talk to literally almost anyone about. I don't care if you're coming to me from your knee, your shoulder, your hip, or whatever. We talk about the head, because we had talked about the head's directly related to the pelvis. You could have nothing really going on, but I've shared with my stories, like if I had, and I have and I don't care, it's on YouTube, I have a slight prolapse, and to be honest, my number one symptom that I have, or the cause right now that increases my symptoms, is not getting sleep, and also tension in my jaw and my head and my breathing. And that's because and I know different strategies now to use to try to be like, oh yes, let's relieve some of this. Let's try to visualize, do some practices that you're going to speak about in a couple minutes. And then everything, I'm like, oh, all I focused on was up here, and my symptoms 3 feet away are fixed.
Right.
Yeah. So that completely makes sense to me. So yes, thank you.
And it's all connected, right? So, our nervous system is spread out through our entire bodies, right? And so if that's, let's just, for lack of a better word, out of whack, right, is going to definitely cause lots of problems. Now, we have to remember too that not only are there these physical responses, but if we go back to the earlier slides, right, there's a lot of emotional and cognitive. So the way that we think about things. So it becomes this vicious cycle, right? I feel anxious all the time. That makes me feel depressed because I'm anxious all the time. So it all works together.
Yeah. And are we treating, I think a lot of, after talking to some moms in the community, it's more of, are we really getting to the underlying issue? Are we just trying to put a Band-Aid on the anxiety? Are we trying to put a Band-Aid on as you're going down, you know, a little slippery slope? Or can we really get to the root of what's going on, why you keep getting triggered, why you had this trauma, like what's actually going on? So I think that's we're all trying to like survive in our daily, you know, in whatever mind shift that comes your way. But I think if, like you were saying, if you really get to the root of why are you hyper aroused, why do you have an increased, you know, if you have a smaller stimulus, why are you getting this big response? So how could we talk about those things? Okay. And so that leads into the next question. How do I know that this is happening to me?
So the best thing that I start my clients out with learning is what are your triggers and what does it feel like to be triggered? So there's, you know, this proverbial, what's in the center, the yellow box, the window of tolerance. It sounds like so like grand. But it's really the place where you're able to think and feel at the same time. So again, if I go back to that example, if I hand you an IKEA dresser, you could assemble it, right? If you're having a good time, you are truly having a good time, you're present, right? If you're sad, you're still present, right? You still can feel your body, you can still carry a conversation, and you're able to regulate yourself, right? So what does it look like if I'm outside my window of tolerance? And I actually have my clients ask themselves that a few times a day.
Okay.
Am I in my window of tolerance? Because also knowing that when you're triggered, it doesn't just trigger and then go away. There's a lasting effect to that, anywhere from like a couple of hours to days.
Yeah.
So we can either be hyper aroused, so that's that fight flight response. And so the people that are often spend a lot of time in that hyper aroused space usually present as anxious, easily overwhelmed, right? So I got a deadline and I can't think. Well, I can't think because my prefrontal cortex is off.
Yeah.
Their responses can be chaotic in their desire to run away or to fight. They may create fights if they feel like someone is getting too close. They can have anger, aggression, or rage. I'm thinking more like what you had said earlier, Laura, like big responses to little triggers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So, you know, really exaggerated responses. People in that state are often rigid. So it's hard for them to make decisions, hard for them to think about other things. And then, you know, we can have moving down the line, like there are some disorders that can result from that, like overeating or restricting. Addictions happen in this place for the person who's trying to like regulate themselves chemically, right? And then there's some impulsivity there because remember, we can't think, right? So we're just acting in a way that gets it to stop. And then the bottom is hypo-aroused, right? So it's more what we would call a freeze response, where you feel maybe disassociated. So in other words, you don't feel present. You feel kind of like woozy, sleepy, out of it. Might like have trouble remembering like what was going on when you felt that way. Feeling disconnected. So, you know, kind of like that feeling you go into the kitchen and you're like, why did I come in here? But like on steroids, like really much bigger display of that. Oftentimes the person feels numb, and disconnected from their feelings and emotions.
Yeah.
It feels really scary to be in freeze response. And at the same time, it's kind of like, you can't get up the energy to do anything about it.
Yeah.
So the things we're going to talk about in a minute is how do we stay in our window of tolerance, which I'll review that in a minute, and the things that cause us to go outside our window of tolerance. So anything that we perceive through our senses, sight, sound, taste, feeling, and smelling, that remind us of the traumatic event can send us outside our window of tolerance. Thoughts and bodily sensations, right? So not just like a sense, through our senses, but an actual sensation within the body can also cause us to go outside our window of tolerance. And then thoughts. So if I have like fear thoughts or diminishing thoughts or guilty thoughts or shame thoughts, that can also trigger us to go outside our window of tolerance. And again, this doesn't just apply to trauma itself. I see this a lot, the same sort of representation in people that are very anxious or very depressed as well.
No, it makes sense. It makes complete sense to me. I mean, I can put myself in. I'm like, oh yes, you have to try to stay in here more.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking of my own examples of like, oh, yes, this is how you go into the overwhelm, into the anxiety, into, and are you really able to? And it's making me realize, and I've known that like triggers, unfortunately, sometimes like social media
Yes.
is a big, in comparison to others or kind of triggers. So, yeah.
And also it really impacts relationships as well, right? So, if I'm having these great big responses, the person that I'm in a relationship with, doesn't matter what kind, teachers, your boss, friends, spouses, children, you're going to kind of blindside them.
Yeah.
Not going to really know what your internal experience is.
Yeah.
So being able to, first you have to kind of step out and identify what are these things that send me outside the window of tolerance. Because if you're not paying attention and you don't know, you can't do anything about it.
Yeah. Awareness is, aware. Yeah.
Definitely. So we learn a lot about that in our sessions. And then now we're going to talk about all the things you can do to help. Okay. So I think this is a helpful graphic. It talks about the process of grounding yourself. So it's teaching your body how to be present, right? That this is now, not then, because your brain doesn't know the difference. As soon as it's triggered, it thinks it's happening. So we have to remind it that we're in the moment and we have to turn off the amygdala.
Yeah.
Right. So we're going to want these things to be super easy, because remember, it's hard to think in that state, right? So we can do things with our bodies. We can stretch, we can exercise, we can walk around, we can literally ground our feet into the floor. We can splash cold water on our face.
I can't wait till it's warm. And I did it this morning. So I was talking to the last person I interviewed about Ayurvedic things and about grounding. And I was like, and I was telling her, I was like, my kids are always barefoot. I mean, I did it out for a reason, but then I did it for a reason. Like I would rather them be grounded and bare feet. And so this morning I had to get something from my car and I went out without shoes on and it's chilly out today, but I just stopped. I was like, I miss this. I miss being grounded and just taking a moment. And I used to do it all the time before my runs and things like that. So I think I'm going to start doing that. I don't care how cold it is. I'm just going to be like, all right, I need to be grounded. I'm just going to come out here for a couple minutes and
yeah. And just be present.
Just be present and connect. Yeah.
And you can do that in a number of different ways too with, I have like a nice quartz, it's like a rock, I guess, but it's nice and heavy and it's cold. Then that feels particularly grounding. You can play with those like thinking putty things, anything like that. And then anything with your 5 senses. So you can name things you see. So 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you feel, 2 things you smell, and 1 thing you taste, right? Easy to remember, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You can use essential oils. You can savor a cup of tea or suck on a peppermint. I know for some of my clients that get hypo aroused, I actually tell them to suck on like a Sour Patch Kid or a Warhead, right? Or an Altoid. Something that's like, woo, that's really strong.
Let's wake you up a little. Yeah.
You can pet your favorite animal. I have 4 dogs, so there's a lot of petting animals in my house. You can look at soothing pictures or listen to your favorite music. And then, so self-soothing is also very important. A lot of the things we just talked about can definitely self-soothe. But again, doing things that are like telling your amygdala, shh, I got this, right?
Yeah. I think those are, these are great. And I'll probably like take this and post it somewhere in my house, because even like I had some time today. My mom took the kids down to her house, and then there's been other times that I don't know, maybe because of the situation has changed. Like I don't connect to music is a huge thing in my life. Like we go to concerts all the time, and I haven't been connected to it. So when I'm, in the shower now, I put on a little music and I'm like, okay, connect back to myself. So it's just being, I at least personally, I think over the past year, there's been such an upheaval and a change in everything that you need to kind of be like, oh no, do this for yourself every day. You need to connect back to what's important to you. Because I am definitely one of those people that my mind will go way into a direction that, it's not healthy. But connecting to those things, there's like, oh yes, you're going to do this for yourself every day. So that's great.
It's like taking your medicine, except you're doing self-soothe instead. So moving through, you can observe, so you can describe an object or the things that you see through your senses. You can describe an interaction only using the facts. So remember, we're always trying not to use judgment when we're doing these things, because that keeps the threat around. We can do breathing exercises. I talk about that on the next slide. And we can distract. So distract does not mean avoid. Distract as a skill itself. So maybe I just heard really distressing news and I can't absorb it right now in this second. It's okay to like go do a crossword puzzle or call a friend, or and then if you have a therapist, you can always take it out and unpack it with your therapist. But but in doing these distract things, again, it's something short, something that helps your brain distract from the painful triggers, and allows you to kind of reset.
Yeah, that's great. What can you do to calm your nervous system so that you're not always outside, like what I was talking about, so you're not always outside of your window, or when you get outside of your window of tolerance, or when it's triggered?
So you can do those grounding exercises, and you can use mindfulness, which of course is all the rage right now. There's a million apps that can help you to learn how to be mindful. Meditation is just a part of mindfulness. We can incorporate mindfulness in a myriad of ways. Here's 6 examples of that. We can mindfully drink and eat. So I remember I went to a retreat one time, and one of the first exercises they had was they gave us all one M&M. And so they made us spend 10 minutes just looking at the M&M.
Oh, Jesus.
We were allowed to pick it up. We could feel it, with our fingers. We could smell it, which doesn't really smell like anything.
No.
And then we were finally allowed to pop it into our mouth. For another 10 minutes, we were not allowed to chew it.
Oh, Jesus.
So
Wow.
to allow the experience of the M&M, the candy shell to melt, and then the quote unquote chocolate in the middle. And I discovered I don't like M&Ms after. They don't taste as good as I thought they did because I really had to pay attention to it. So
yeah, when the outside's melting, I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. So, mindfulness helps us to have this non-judgmental practice of being present in the moment with whatever we do. So if we're going for a walk, we can take a mindful walk. So actually, instead of getting lost in thought while we're walking, paying attention to everything that comes in through our senses. We can listen to music or someone's voice and really listen to the sound, the quality, and the content. We can listen really close. We can stretch our hearing out and listen far away. We can do a body scan and pay attention to all our body parts and then relax them. We can observe and describe. So we can just practice using facts to observe and describe. So here's a tissue box. It's square. It has blue flowers on it. So I'm not saying, oh, there's an ugly tissue box. I'm just using my senses to describe the tissue box.
Okay.
And then the last one on here is being mindful of our thoughts and emotions. So this one takes a little practice, but really it's an observation of our thoughts without attaching any kind of meaning. So they just come in and then they go out.
Wow. That is great. Like I was talking to you before, I've been doing some mindful meditation trainings, and all of those things we've hit on during the meditation trainings. It's like, observe something come in, observing something come out, and being aware of your thought, and all of that stuff. Actually, the food thing as well. I actually, ironically, somebody, and I should have, and I haven't, she probably knew it before I did. She got me a book probably 10 years ago on like mindfulness and eating. And I was like, yeah, I should have read that, huh? Because not something that you do.
No, we're busy chatting, watching TV, looking at our phones.
Not being present, yes.
Right. So this slide just talks a little bit about a beginner way of meditating. So the illustration on the left talks about doing it in a quiet space that's free from distraction. Your posture should be a nice straight back or lying down. The breathing that you're doing, we'd like to slow it down and have it be deep, filling your belly. Because we're trying to center and ground ourselves, and we probably don't recognize it, but we breathe very shallowly when we're triggered, right? And so in breathing deep like that, it's very, very calming, and it helps to reset your mind. So if you find that you're getting distracted by your thoughts, you just gently bring your attention back to your breath. 2 or 3 minutes a day, really. You can build up to longer. And I tell you, in the beginning, it's going to be short.
Yes.
Because we're not used to doing that.
No, and we were talking about that before in the class that I'm taking. I was like, okay, I can do the 1 minute. I can do the 5 minute, but I've had 20-minute ones. I'm like, I'm not ready for this at all.
Sure. Yeah. The other illustration I have here is square breathing. Again, a nice, easy way to use your breath as an anchor to pay attention to. I use this, pardon me, I use this one a lot when I'm trying to go to sleep at night if I'm having a hard time.
Yeah.
It's almost like counting sheep, but not really. And so basically it's like a square. You breathe in for a count of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You hold your breath for that count of 4. You breathe out for a count of 4, and then you hold your breath for a count of 4. And you just keep doing that until you feel calmer.
Yeah, that's often what, not necessarily that technique, but when I having trouble breathing too. I'm not breathing, but I'm having trouble going to sleep. I often just go right back to my breath, because I've been working on breath work with my nervous system and whatnot for a year with different exercises and stuff. And I've really been able to elongate my inhales and exhales and really connect to my, my relaxation system. And I think it's when I was more consistent with, it's ironically, because my practices, I combine exercises, but they're exercise like we're holding a position and then we're breathing in that position, and that's going to reset muscles and connect to your nervous system. But the more that I did those things consistently, I think the more at a calm state I was, because I was simply tapping into that system more.
Sure.
Otherwise, I wasn't taking that conscious awareness of, oh, let's take a minute or two. But ironically, so we were talking about, postpartum women and perinatal women. I actually started my daughter, who's 2.5. I started to do some. I was like, okay, we're gonna relax and we're gonna breathe, and we're gonna breathe in and breathe out. So, knock on wood. At this point, when I put her down for a nap, when I put her down for bed, I sit next to her bed for, now it's only a minute, it used to be a couple minutes, and we do our breathing, and she works on her breathing. Not a peep from her as I'm leaving the room, and she's like, I miss mommy. And then I'm like, that's why we work on our breathing. And then she does it, and then it actually, it calms her. It calms her. Now, the 5-year-old, I didn't get to him soon enough, and he just fights it. So, we're actually trying, because when one of them has an issue, the other one wants to kind of try to help. So he's trying to help her by giving her these breathing techniques a little bit. So he's not doing it himself yet, but I'm trying to get to the next generation too.
Yeah. So he's listening.
He's listening, and that's important. That's important. So anyway, sorry for that side topic.
Not a worry. Really great illustrations though. And our breath is so important, and we have it with us all the time, right?
Yes.
So, we might as well tap into that.
Yes, we have access to it, just taking the concerted effort. And then, just like anything else, you don't realize the benefits of it until you do it consistently enough. And then you're like, oh, geez, this really is helpful. Let me just take, maybe not every hour, every couple hours. I'm just going to sit here for a moment, and the kids are doing whatever, they're watching TV or they're playing, and I'm just going to work on my breath, because I need to just connect to myself and be mindful and present again.
Right.
So,
yeah. And then the last slide just talks about yoga. At Lotus Blossom, we offer a bunch of virtual options for yoga, but we actually have one specifically for people who have trauma in their background. Again, it doesn't need to be an identified trauma, and it's fully virtual for now. Probably will remain, but it actually is more invitational, less about holding poses and more about inviting your body to let go.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
I think I might have to take you up on one of those classes.
It's great. And so yoga helps increase our body awareness, right? So remember, the person who's hypo-aroused tends to be disconnected, right, and numb from their body. And so yoga can help us get more in touch with that body awareness, reduces stress and anxiety, it improves your flexibility, it reduces the muscle tension, strain, and inflammation. calms the nervous system, right? This is what we're really talking about. And then lowers blood pressure, amongst many other benefits. But specifically for people who have emotional wounds, it's a beautiful, beautiful way to help you get back into your window of tolerance.
Yes. Yes. And be better connected to your body as well. You know, the movement patterns and empowered. It empowers you as well. I mean, once we're and work through some of these things, we just, that's, the better sense of strength and being empowered. So that's the, not the opposite end, but that's what we're looking for.
Sure. Definitely. Most definitely.
Well, that was great.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, I learned a lot.
Yeah. So here's our contact information. If anyone's interested in just chatting about what I talked about today, or if you feel like you need some extra help, again, there's me, and then there's Jacqueline and Victoria, who also work for me. So Lotus Blossom Psychotherapy.
Very nice.
Stop sharing. Okay, here we are.
Let's see. Let me just ask if there's any questions, and if not, then we will be all good to go. And that was great. I learned a lot myself, and I hope everyone else learned a lot along the way. So yeah. I think these are things that people can take, almost immediately into their daily lives, and try to not, you don't want to take on too much, but try to take these little steps on trying to improve everything.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yes, thank you for joining us. And those of you that are going to watch it on repeat, thank you for joining us on there as well. So
definitely.
Yes, as somebody said, it builds awareness. Exactly. Absolutely. Builds awareness, and that's what we want to do. We want to try to build awareness and empower and educate. So we're all living a little bit more centered and healthier lives.
Yeah. Perfect. Absolutely.
All right. So thank you. This is Laura Iden Gibbons from Dynamic Movement Physical Therapy and Wellness, and Gerry Viggiani from Lotus Blossom Psychotherapy. And we loved having you on today. And if you have any questions about either of these two things, please reach out to either one of us. So thank you so much.